All right, welcome to Shift. With me today is Brett Harward. Brett is an amazing individual. He's one of my favorite people on the planet. I don't get to spend nearly enough time with him. And he's an author, he's an entrepreneur, he's a father. I think you might have more kids than I do. There's not many people that do, but
I
I
do.
think you have 13, if I'm right.
13. Yep.
13. So I have 8 and everybody thinks I'm crazy. So we can definitely dive into what raising 13 children looks like. Um, and he's also known as the trainer because Brett runs or hosts or facilitates, I guess is the right word, a personal development seminar, I guess you would call it. I mean, I don't know what, we're always trying to figure out what the right language is on these things these days, but it is a personal development seminar called BU that was really one of the most transformational events of my life. And if you have an opportunity, check out BU. Is it butraining.com?
Yep.
Yep. Check that out. Now, you're going to want to know more about it. And unfortunately for you, but fortunately for us, what happens at BU stays at BU. So what I can tell you is it's amazing. It's transformational. And hopefully the conversation that Brett and I have today will give you some insight into some of the gifts he has and some of the things that you may learn from him at that particular event. So Brett, welcome to Shift. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Keith. I'm excited to spend some time with you today. So
Yeah.
it'd just be fun just to talk. I love we've had a couple times where we've just chatted about some life things, and I always enjoy our conversations. So
Yeah, I appreciate that. I feel the same way. And I'd like to start, if we could, just tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us your story. You run a tech company still, I believe. And tell me all about how you got there. Live in Wyoming, Jackson Hole. You got a bunch of kids.
I have a blended family. So you got me beat as far as just you in having 8 of your own kids, but I have 13 kids. My wife had 7 girls, and I had four boys and 2 girls of my own. So I've got 9 girls, that's like 25 kids just having 9 girls.
It is. I have 6 daughters, and I 100% would agree to that.
Right. So but I grew up in Arizona and I've gone through a lot of phases. I have my life. I kind of break my life into lives. And so when I talk, a lot of times I'll talk about my first life. I was a computer programmer and kind of did the whole, just, got completely infatuated with success and traveling all over the world and doing big projects and trying to prove out that I was smart and that I was capable and could provide and so then I've sold a couple of businesses and made money and done that, and then I've gotten into some of the I started consulting. So I've done a lot of, my second life was more of sharing things with people and observing people and being more less focused on proving myself and more focused on learning what made other people tick. And I've kind of been moving into a third phase right now. I don't know how to define, but my best word for it is probably like a legacy phase. It's most of the projects that I do right now, I measure them against. So what's the impact this will have on the world, on the planet, after I'm gone? And I'm not planning on leaving anytime soon, but I'm starting to just move into that. What am I leaving behind phase of life? And so it really changes the whole paradigm of what I focus on and where I choose to spend time. So
Really? Do you think that legacy conversation or question for you comes with age? Not saying that you're old, just wondering if that's like, or is it after you've accomplished or achieved certain things and you realize that maybe those things aren't like as fulfilling as, because you've done some pretty cool stuff.
yeah, I think it's both. And I think I've done enough cool stuff to know that when everything boils out, I've done, I've done cool stuff in lots of different categories. So I've done some really cool stuff financially, and I've done some really cool stuff making a difference with people. And at the end of the day, the financial stuff just kind of fades off. It seems like over time, and the people stuff just keeps coming back around, and that grows, and they go out and do some great things. And I can kind of say, you know, I had a little piece of that, because the shift that they made, that when I was working with them or doing things with them, is now translating into bigger things and them influencing people, and those things continue to grow, and the money side of stuff tends to just slowly dissipate. You know, and so I don't know. So part of it is age. So I'm, for the first time, I'm 58 years old, or I turned 58, I guess, this month. And so, and I sit and scratch my head, because 58, the number sounds really old to me. I don't feel that way. I feel, you know, I'm young. I do all kinds of crazy stuff still, and go up and do crazy things up in the mountains. And then there's still a lot of times when you know, my brain thinks, I'll go out and play basketball, and my brain will think, you know, okay, here's the move. And my legs and body don't quite, they're not cooperating, but it doesn't go down the way I see it in my head and the way I used to experience it. And so
Yeah.
I'm having this reality check of my own mortality. And it's starting to cause me to say, all right, you know, I don't know whether I have 10 years left, or whether I have 20 years left, but there's this, and the years seem to fly by. That's the thing actually that really changes for me, is it seems like Christmas comes every month now. I just keep saying, I can't believe we're at Christmas time again. I can't
Yeah.
believe we're in the second quarter of 2021. I'm still writing 2019 on checks.
Yeah.
I
It's
missed all of
crazy.
2020, right?
Yeah. It certainly does. I know I'll be 47 this year, and my kids will not stop reminding me that I'm almost 50. And so I'm old to them now. And what's interesting is I had a friend of mine yesterday he and I were having a conversation. He talked about his dad sent his son a photo of like his dad and his granddad from the 50s, and he was really just kind of amazed at how old that photograph was. And I thought, well, that's only like 40 years ago. And then I had to do the math and go, wait, no, that's like 70 something years ago. Because for me, like, I'm perpetually 18. It's still 1995. Like,
Right.
it's not that far away, because I'm the same way. I feel like, you know, get on the mountain bike, we go hit the trail, and then I come home and go, oh, wait, I'm not 25 anymore. It's not the same.
My son was a few years back. I was talking with my youngest son, and I was filling out some paperwork, and I said, wait, what year were you born? Were you born in 2005 or 2006? And he said 2000. He said 2005, and I said, okay. I said that makes that's what I thought. I mean, I just didn't want to do the math on the years, and then he said, what year were you born? And I said, I was born in 1963. And he looked at me and he said, I didn't know it went back that far. Like 19, like in the 1900s, you were born back in the
19.
1900s. And it's like, yep.
Yeah, it is. It's flying by. I would definitely agree with that. And I think having a lot of kids and a lot of, in some ways, responsibilities adds to that. Like when you're doing, and especially for me, like I do what I love. So there's always some more to do. There's always things that I want to do. And I think because of that, it just kind of flies by, you know? Like
Yeah.
I'm sure people who are in jobs that they think are miserable or things that they don't enjoy are probably thinking, oh no, this is a drag. This is taking way too long to get to the next phase. But yeah, I just think I think about my legacy a lot. We think a lot about generational healing, and I think a lot about how to raise my kids in a way that they're going to go out and create additional positive change, right?
Mhm.
And so it's interesting because we've reached a place in like our business where we're good and we can still build and grow, but we've kind of gotten to a place where it's like, okay, what's the next thing? Because it isn't money. So I love that you brought that up, because so many people are thinking about how do we make so much more money? How do we do this? How do we do that? That's the metric for success. And in my experience, it's great. It's just not fulfilling. It offers me time freedom, which is what I really, really want. Like to have the time to clear my schedule, take my kid to the dentist if I need to, go to the soccer games, go to the, you know, whatever it is, because those are the things that when we reach the end of our time, whatever that is, that we're going to remember way more than the board meeting.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot more legacy. I mean, there's some version of legacy that comes with finances. It'd be nice to leave kids with something just to help them out, but that's not the big. Those aren't the big legacies. And especially it's like, heck, my kids are doing way better than I did. So they're
Yeah.
I've got kids already that they make lots more money than I've ever made, and they've got great careers, and it's mind-boggling to me that I've got we got kids that are professionals and doctors and dentists and business owners, and that it's like, wow, I'm getting old. I mean, they're not like kids anymore. So I call my kids, I call my oldest son all the time for business advice, and I'm a pretty seasoned business guy, and there's a lot of stuff that just completely eludes me that he's mastered, and we get into the social media and into marketing. It's just changed a lot. So much stuff has changed. So
that's a really cool thing, and I think that's a really great example of like humility, to be able to call your kid and say, hey, help me out with this, walk me through this. Because like our son, my oldest boy is 21, and my wife and I have not been the best financial managers. We brought a lot of old habits that probably weren't the best. And so we've worked in our adult lives to correct some of those things and really kind of help our children grow into smart money managers, understand it's a tool, and help them like do as I say, not as I did, because we didn't do like I learned these at 35, not 17. And so one of my daughters came to me the other day. She's starting to save her allowance and wants to save her money. She's like, what do you think's the best way? And I said, you know what? You should call your brother, because he's doing a much better job than I did, and he'll be able to help you. And he was just amazed that I would like pass that off and not. I was like, dude, you're crushing it. Like you're doing a great job. And I think a lot of parents don't like to. It's an interesting dynamic. You see a lot of parents who get frustrated, or their egos get in the way when their kids start to do better than them, or they want to like leave the old neighborhood, or they want to,
I'm really proud. I'm really proud of my kids, and I'm happy for them.
Yeah.
And I know that they're going to have some crashes and burns as well. And I look forward to those, because those were, on the backside of those end up being great experiences, because they make you, they're the things that kind of force you to reprioritize and get clear about what's important, what you like, and what you want to do. So I don't see my role as trying to protect them from life's pains and life's lessons. I give them any advice I can, but I'm really confident they're smart and capable, and that they'll figure stuff out. So in my mind, that's the best thing I can do as a parent, is just raise kids that can figure stuff out. And then, as life happens, that I know they'll figure it out.
Yeah. I'm learning that now. Our son had a bit of a situation he got into, and, when we heard about it, we were like, okay, how can we help? What can we do? And he kind of was like, I got this. I'm good. And we're like, are you sure? And he's like, I'm good. Like, if I need you, I will reach out. And it was awesome. And it was like, oh, okay, it's time for me to back off and let him do his thing, and trust in that process. And I love that you said you look forward to them crashing, because it is where the growth happens. It is where like we could tell them everything we know, but they have to experience it to some extent on their own.
Well, the training thing that you went through with me, it's funny, because one of the things is people are taking inventory of their life, and they're really taking a hard look at things. And one of the questions that I get asked all the time is, so what can I do so my kids don't have to experience the pain that I experienced? And what can I do? Is that even preventable? And it's like, I don't know whether or not it's preventable or not. I don't think it is. Um, and if I could wave a magic wand and take that away from people, I would never do that, because that's the good stuff of life. That's where the lessons and it's where we get our power to later on to have empathy and compassion and be able to relate to folks. And if we just coasted through life without ever crashing,
Yeah.
we'd have a false sense of what other people, I mean, we wouldn't relate to others for sure.
Yeah.
We'd be the only one. We'd be the only one who had done that.
Yeah.
Right?
There's a great quote that I'm sure I'll butcher from one of the Stoic philosophers. And it relates to that, where they says, when something happens to you, be grateful that it happened to you and that you were able to handle it and that you were able to move through it, and feel bad for the people that have never been tested because they don't know what they're made of. And that resonates with me, because even in the middle of things, like, it hurts, it's tough, it's hard, it's not fun. And in my experience, every time I've leaned into those challenges, I come out on the other side better for it, maybe a little scarred, but there's growth, and it is empowering to understand that you're capable, right? Like, that's such a gift. And you talk about legacy, and it's funny to me because I think you've probably impacted more people in a very direct way than most people I know. Like, how many people do you think have been through? I'm sure you've probably done the math at some point, and then you just said, well, it's more than I can count.
There's probably 12,000 or so that have been through the programs that I teach.
Yeah. And
So,
I mean, that's huge. That's the ripple effect on that, because I can tell you that coming out of that event, the 10 people that lived in my household at the time are better for it. And the people that they interact with are better. Like, the ripple in that. So that 12,000 is like, a million people that are impacted in a tremendously way.
so I have a lot of people, so that want me to go do stuff with them or do it, or talk or be at events, and I'll just share with you. So I going through that event with you and watching. So you talk about taking things on and dealing with things, and watching you do that, and watching you break some records and stuff. And when it's because of that, actually, that when I get an email from you saying, hey, do you want to, would you come in and do this thing with me on this podcast? It's that earned when you ask me to do stuff. It's like, I'm in, because I know you go all out, all in, right through the middle of stuff, and you don't sidestep things. And so, and I have massive respect for people that are, as Brene Brown would say, I have massive respect for people that are in the arena.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah,
and you're one of those guys. So that's why
well, I appreciate that. And my kids thank you. And my wife thank you. I was lucky enough to experience that with my wife. But yeah, my entire family is grateful for. And there are times where things in my household will happen that are maybe less than ideal, either with my own kids or in relationships that they're in, and somebody will look over and they'll be like, "So I got to go to BU too, huh?"
That's right.
Like, yeah, someday. I mean, I left there knowing that I would have to send my kids, because there's so many things that we try to do, and we try to minimize the damage.
Right.
But the reality is that I have no control over how they perceive or how they receive what happens. And so at the end of the day, we all got to do our own work. And
Right.
and it's one of the most important things, I think. And so I want to talk about, because you brought up Brene Brown, and
Yep.
we had the opportunity to work on something we can talk about when we met in Utah with about a dozen other people, and did a real intimate little roundtable.
Rumble. Yep.
Yeah, and we rumbled on Brene Brown stuff. And there was a tool in there that you talked about, and I was wondering if you remember this and you can share about it. And you guys called it turning away. And I think from a couples and relationship and vulnerability space, it's a really great tool. And I was wondering if I could convince you to share that with us.
The I mean, the concept there was that you know, when we avoid our vulnerability, when we avoid our truth, our what's really going on, and when we sidestep it, what we end up doing is we end up turning away from other people. And there's these critical moments in conversations, and often even just in the relationship as a whole, where we have this choice, and we know it, we see it, where we can either, we got this thing inside and it's eating at us, or it's bugging us, or we have this insecurity that scares us to death, and rather than turn towards the person, which is, and vulnerability to me is when we turn towards, and we just lean into the other person, we trust them, we say, all right, well, here's what's going on. And then turning away is when we deny it, or push it aside, or turn it back on them, or deflect, or all the kind of coping mechanisms that, and when we turn away, we lose our ability to resolve the situation. We lose our ability to grow from it. We lose our ability to take the relationship deeper and choose a way more shallow path. And so when we recognize those critical moments, because what makes them stand out is that there's this moment that's like, okay, do I want to go here or not? And then we make conscious choices and say, I don't want to, I'm going to deflect, or cry, or get emotional, or do things that kind of keep things shallow, and just hold it inside. I'm going to just keep it inside. I don't know if that's what you're talking about, that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's the choice, right? I feel like the way we presented it was sort of, when you go to bed at night, and how you and your spouse are upset at each other, and do you sleep back to back and on the edges, like you got that king size mattress, and who can get closer to the edge from each other.
Right.
And what's crazy is a lot of couples will say, well, we don't go to bed mad, but that doesn't mean that they don't go to bed turning away. Did you get to a resolution? Are you really close to one another? And that, Carrie and I have really implemented that. And I think the thing that's super important in that is that it's a choice. I mean, we've been married 23 years, been together for 25. So we've been through all the things, and I know that there's more to come. And just in that moment when you're like, I can't believe she said that, I can't believe she did that, to make the choice and to go, she is my wife, she's my partner, I'm turning toward that. It is really just it's a choice. And there's times in my own head where I've been like, turn in. Like, I have to tell myself, even though I'm like, I really don't want her, I know it's not what I want to do.
Right. Even with this, all the stories we make up about, no, but it's more comfortable. I'm more comfortable laying over on my right side, and I can't. And we have all these. It's not that I'm turning away. It's just but it is that you're turning, right? Because there's a time when you're turning away, right?
Yeah, and it's uncomfortable, and we have to get used to being uncomfortable. We had a situation recently where, Carrie was having feelings about things and struggling with some stuff, and I didn't feel like I had the capacity to be there for her. And I had to be really conscious about it. I'm just going to sit here, and I'm going to listen, and I'm going to let her cry, and I'm not going to get on my phone, and I'm not going to do the other things that in my head I really want to. Right. And so I think people have this mythology that, like, the people who listen, or the people that are always present, are just good at it. Like, I'm just not good at it. And it's not true. You choose in.
You touched on something that's really key right now. One of the greatest gifts you can ever give another human being in this day and time is to turn off your phone. There's something profound about having a conversation and just doing something that simple that says, I want to send the message. the current generation might not even, they might not realize there was a time that if you weren't sitting at home in your house, people could not get a hold of you. I mean, that
Yeah.
when you left for the day, you would go all day long and no one could call you or do anything. And the only time you could talk to someone is if you were within like 12 feet, however long that curly cord thing would read.
Yep.
That was your distance where you could
Yeah.
talk to someone that wasn't standing in front of you.
Yeah.
And we've lost something in this trying to juggle 500 things all at once, with these devices. And it is, I don't know that anything makes me feel more important than having someone else reach over and not even come in with their phone turned off, reach over and say, I'm going to turn my phone off for this conversation. I want to be fully present. And they turn it off and turn it over. And it's like, even the difference between leaving your phone face up and face down,
Yeah.
when it's turned off, it really does make a big difference.
Yeah,
right?
it does. How many hours? You don't strike me as the kind of guy that was maybe talking on the phone a whole lot when you were a kid, but when you see the kids that were curled up by the kitchen, by the oven, because that was as far as their phone would go. They were they were on the other side of the wall, right? They
Right. So that's how you got privacy, is you had to take the cord around the wall, right?
Yeah, there's that little divot in the carpet because your sister sat there for 12 hours at a time talking to her boyfriend. I remember when I was a kid. I mean, I grew up in Las Vegas, and so you grew up in Arizona, both desert parts of the world. And I mean, we spent hours in the desert without phones, without parents, without. I mean, I look back now, and it's like I would never let my kid go for that extended period. And then I go, well, I turned out okay, I think. What was?
Yeah, I can think of all kinds of things I did as a kid that I would be arrested for if I let my kids do the same.
Right?
Yeah. I remember I remember laying on the front dashboard at times while we were driving, and sitting on my dad's lap on the freeway, and he would let me steer the car on the freeway as a 3-year-old.
How do we make it? How do we get out alive?
I have no idea.
Yeah, my sister used to sit on the floorboards of the Toyota Celica while we were drinking, because there was 3 of us and we had a 4-seat car, and so they just put her on the floorboard in the front row, in the front seat, and that's just what we did, And yeah, it's crazy how things have shifted in today's world. What are your big thoughts on that? If you want to go there, because I know, you kind of tend to stay out of the political world, or out of the, all the muck and the noise. And most of the stuff that I see you share is pretty positive, and you just had a really cool experience that, is kind of your Facebook story for a long time that I want to dive into. But I'm curious what you think about what's happening culturally, and how do you think we maybe course correct that?
I have, it depends on which lens I'm looking through. So as a parent, I have massive concerns. I have concerns about my kids. I see how much screen time they spend, and we do things to try and curb it. But it's like, wow.
Yeah. How old are your kids that are still home?
I have we got 2 15-year-olds and a 19-year-old. And they're still home, but and then at various times we've got other kids that are home for a little bit, and then it's just the lack of exercise, the lack of outdoors, the lack of social dynamics. I hate that you can just hit a button and unfriend someone and block people and do that, and I hate that they're learning that that's how you resolve things. And if you don't like what someone says or thinks, you can turn them off. I think that that's devastating for our society. I don't get super political, but no matter where you sit on Trump and on politics, I find it massively disturbing that we're silencing people that, and I think it's important that, and I would say that about if I knew that they were blocking some white supremacist on Facebook, I'd be like, you just can't, you can't arbitrate the ideas, and you got to let people do their own thing. And I have no problem with people saying, man, I disagree with everything you're saying, or not reading or watching stuff that they don't like or want to see. But I have a problem when we start making choices for people, and we limit. I think at some point that comes back to bite us.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that people work through seeing things and seeing the issues. And so, yeah, I have actually pretty strong feelings. I'm terrified, and I can watch even just in the gap between your generation and my generation. There's a gap in people's ability to resolve conflict and resolve issues, and there's a between your generation and your kids. There's a massive gap, and I watch how it's translating into business now. I still work with big companies, have tons of employees, and I watch the challenges they're having with these 20-year-olds and even 30-year-old folks that are coming in, and they have no ability to deal with conflict and disagreement, and they take offense at everything. It's like, get over it. You're not the arbiter, and you getting offended doesn't do anything for anybody. That just,
Yeah, it's really tricky. I've been doing a lot of reflecting and conversations around like cancel culture and the idea that, this opinion or this thought or this thing is so invalid that it shouldn't exist. And it's really hard for me to wrap my head around it because, I don't get as mad at Facebook or social media companies for censoring because they're companies, they're private entities. They can do what they want. And we get to make the choice to go, well, I'm just not going to participate in that game and I'm going to go somewhere else. I don't think it's right. I don't agree with it. I tend not to get very upset about it though, because it's like, well, you signed up for it and you didn't build it. And so they get to do what they want. And, and at the same time, as those things become monoliths, it becomes hard to compete against them. And so I'm really in this gray area where like, I don't know what to do or what to think other than like, I'm really all about proximity right now and raising, like modeling behavior for my kids. Like if that bothers you, let's talk about why. If it frustrates you. And, and even in our business where we do a lot of coaching and mentoring, people will reach out to us and say, well, this happened or that happened. And we're like, okay, great. Conversation's over until we can get everybody on the phone and we can work it out together. And I'm surprised at how many times people go, yeah, I know it's not that big a deal. I'm like, no, it is. It is a problem. It is a challenge, but they don't know how to talk to one another about it. They don't know. And they're so afraid to actually converse and like resolve the conflict. They'd rather just go do something else or let it be or deal with it, which is really the opposite of dealing with it.
Right. Yeah, no, yes, I'm massively concerned from the business perspective. People who can figure out there's going to be a massive need for coaching and like someone intervening later on in life to say, all right, I know you and your boss don't see eye to eye, and you're like on the warpath. It's really not a big deal. And let's I'm going to teach you some things that you're going to think are just miraculous, that our generation, we couldn't have survived past 7 without learning these skills. And
interesting. That's yeah, it is definitely it's definitely good for the coaching business and the therapy counseling.
Right.
Hopefully it's not great for the pharmaceutical business, which I'm afraid that it will be, because that's how most people tend to manage their things, right? Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I hope that, and that's kind of part of the reason why this podcast was launched, was so many things that have benefited me and helped me in my journey, right? Overcoming, drinking and holding our marriage together, which early on was very much my wife's doing. I was lucky enough that she didn't sign the papers and gave me space to work through my stuff. And I just think that like so many people now are like almost all of our friends are divorced or they're, in really, really tough places. And so part of this was really launching this podcast. I've sort of referred to myself at times as an unwilling participant because I don't know what I'm doing 100%. It's super fresh and new for me, but I feel like it's something I have to do.
Right.
And I hope that it helps someone achieve something new and fresh for them. And so having people like you that have those gifts of bringing things like back down to reality is really I'm really grateful for that, because hopefully this will help some people in the future go, oh, maybe I do need to just not worry about it. Right. And it sounds kind of condescending. I've had some people I've talked to where I'm like, you could just let that go. And they get so mad at the idea that like they could just have no opinion about it. They could just let it be. Like it can't be that simple. What if, but. And so do you have some advice on how to just let it go?
Well, so and there's two. So letting go is like one extreme. I'm not sure that that's the answer either. I think our answers is that people need to own their voice and their insights, and we need to share. But we need to listen as well. And if everybody is
Hmm.
sharing and listening, because just biting your tongue and not contributing your insights, that exacerbates the problem as well. And so for me, it's just, so I have this really interesting, if you got a few minutes, I'll give you a full interesting layout and philosophy here.
Yeah, I got all the time in the world.
So one of the things, I have a version of diversity and inclusion that's a little bit different than what most people teach. And it starts with kind of a four premise. There's four places that we can approach this situation from. And the first place is from conflict, which we see a lot of right now. That's the cancel culture. It's like, yeah, screw you. I'm blocking you. I'm not listening. And we go to war with people who have different ideas than we have. And we're not at war over Nazi stuff. We're at war over things like healthcare, and that's not a war topic. That's a no matter where you stand on the issue, it certainly is an issue that warrants discussion, and people struggling with health is a it's a big deal, and
Yeah,
and and it is an issue about and how we pay for it and what we can pay for, and what people are accountable, and how does that fit into the equation. And if someone you know weighs 400 pounds and they don't eat and take care of themselves, well, should I have to? I mean, there's a lot of good questions there,
yeah,
right? And
100%. Yeah,
um and so we're not I mean, we're canceling over stuff that isn't like way out of bounds in left field. It's they're all mainstream hardcore issues, right? And so, but the first level is open conflict, which we see a lot of. The second level, a lot of people talk about, but it's usually a veiled open conflict. The second level people deal with it is with tolerance. So they don't like it. They work on just tolerating it, which is kind of the biting your tongue. And I'm not
sure.
going to say anything, and I'm not going to openly, but we're still passive aggressive, and we still have our little barbs and jabs, and the whole time that someone else is talking, we're thinking, you're an idiot. I'm going to tolerate you because that's what I'm supposed to do. But
Because I'm supposed to.
I'm
Yeah,
supposed to. The third level is acceptance. And a lot of people think that's like the highest level, is when you can just accept someone and their ideas. The thing that I'm challenged by with that word is that when you're accepting someone, when you say, well, I'm going to just accept them for who they are, you're what you're really saying is there's something unacceptable about them. And I am, because elsewise I would need to accept them. There's something unacceptable that I am going to overlook or bypass. And it still brings that judgment with it that is a little bit kinder than tolerance, but not
okay.
much. Um, And because the only thing we have to accept is the unacceptable. Right.
Interesting.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Say, and then there's a fourth level, and I think it's the kind of the solution, which the fourth level of engagement with that is embracing, where it's like, not only do I accept it, but I don't want it to change. I don't want you to change. I want you to bring all of who you are and all of the differences and all the quirkiness and goofiness and brilliance. And I want you to bring all of it. And I don't want you to change anything because I know that the overall fabric and texture is prettier, and it's more effective when we include all of that. And I love you just exactly how you are. There's not any part of you that I need to change or accept, and I wouldn't want to if I could, right? And so, from the stuff that I don't know if I've explained it that way, but from the stuff that I do and teach, that I kind of engage like that in life. I don't have a lot of, in fact, when I find myself, so I found some tools, I found some really quick catches. So when I find myself in disagreement or thinking, the most common thing that we think, so the triggers for me are, I think, yeah, you don't see the big picture. That's one of my big go-to, or or you don't understand, or I'm smarter than you. I mean, those two kinds of conversations, if I catch myself having those, I immediately flip them and say, wait a second, maybe I don't see the big picture. Maybe I'm the one who's missing something. So it's, you don't see the big picture, you're missing something. And so I turn that around. So in my life, I've adopted this thing that I call my 2-question rule. And it has been profound and life-changing for me. So when I find myself disagreeing, or, and it could be in almost any situation, I start with saying, Brett, you're probably missing something here. And so before I ever make a judgment or determination, I ask 2 questions. My first question is always, what you're saying makes no sense at all to me. I don't understand it. I totally disagree with it. Tell me what I'm missing. What am I missing here? And I ask, and I really want to know. I really want to know.
Yeah.
And most of the time they proceed to tell me exactly what I'm missing. And it's like, dang, okay, you're right. I did not see it from that perspective at all. And then my second question is simply a check on the first question, which is I have to ask them one more question to dig deeper before I'll even comment or share my ideas when I'm in judgment. And so my second question is usually, it revolves around how they answered the first question. So
okay.
It's usually, so are you saying this? Here's an example. I owned a software company at one point, and I had one of my frontline people that was making at the time probably $8 an hour. One of my customer service people, they came and they said, if you wanted to I'm getting better at this. I'm still not great at it, but if you want to totally have me checked out of a situation in judgment, if you start by, hey, you know what you should do? Right?
That's Carrie. That's my wife.
Yeah. The second that they start that, I'm already on the defense.
Yeah, you're already out.
It's like, dude, you make $7 an hour. So it's like, if I own this company, you know what I think you should do with this company? And I had this person $7 an hour, and it's like, I'm ready to argue with them, because it's like, dude, that's why you don't own this company, because you make $7 an hour, and I own a company with 75 employees, and you're not going to tell me anything that I haven't already done or thought of, and it's what you're about to say is stupid. But you may not have even said it, and I already know it's stupid, right? And I had an employee once that told me, what we should do? We should give our software. I sold pest control. I had a company that was the biggest pest control software company in the world. Doesn't take much to be the biggest pest control software company in the world.
Right.
But we were a good sized company, and had like 75 employees. And he said, I think you should give the software away for free. And these guys, people love our support. And he was a support person. He said, I think people would just pay more for support, and we could make our money off of support. And I said, dude, you're an idiot. I mean, what? you don't understand business. I'm thinking
Yeah.
you're completely retarded about business. You can't give stuff away for free. I mean, and it was back in the early stages of the internet. We hadn't quite figured it out, and it was like, man, you're sounding like some of those other companies that are just like, that make no sense. Their business model makes no sense. They do stuff for free. They let you like search
Yep.
things for free, like that Google company or whatever.
Yeah, that silly little Google.
That's silly little Google and the Facebook thing where you just sign up and they don't charge you anything. It's like, that's stupid. Yeah. That is completely ridiculous, that thought. And now you look at how they even bill for like Microsoft, 365 and most software now is all the SaaS model. And what he was describing was SaaS, was, software as a service.
Yeah.
And you had to forego the short-term, charging $1 million for your software. But you could charge, you could charge $50,000 a month for the support on it. And you'd end up making a lot more money in the long run. And I thought that's the dumbest idea ever at the time. And I said, in that point in time, because I had this 2-question rule even back then. And it's like, okay, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And I remember I started, my response to him was, okay, that sounds like the dumbest thing I've ever heard from a business perspective. Tell me what I'm missing. And he went on to explain, and I said, okay, wait a second. So you're saying that what I actually translated to, which was profound for me at the time, I'm selling software and about 10% of my revenue came from customer service.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I said, what you're really saying to me is that our software is excluding us from getting as many customers as we can, but people would pay a lot more for our service than what we're charging. Is that what you're saying? He said, yeah, that's what I'm saying. And I totally missed the whole part about changing the price of our initial software. Mm-hmm. But I said, okay, well, I'm going to look at the service thing because that's an interesting idea. Let's test that. And it sounded stupid to me still, but I said, I don't really know the answer. And our company went from about $1.2 million in revenue to about 10 million over the next year. And about 60% of our revenue came from training and customer service because I entertained this nonsense for just a little bit, right? And I asked some questions. And this $7 an hour person's, their insights, they saw a different angle to things than I did because they were on the phones doing customer service with people. And they're like, man, they love our service. They love it. We're not charging them enough for it. That's really what he was saying. He didn't have an epiphany about the whole SaaS thing, but what he was describing was that.
Yeah. Right? He saw something. He just didn't articulate it in that major. But there's a ton of humility in being able to say, that sounds really stupid, but tell me more, right? Like there's a ton of vulnerability in going, I think that's the dumbest thing ever, and I'm going to give you more time to convince me it's not.
Well, and I'm going to ask a specific question. So the format of the question is actually, I stumbled onto that, but the format of the question is genius because I have to open my mind just enough to say, okay, I'm probably missing something. And that wasn't super offensive to me. Missing something wasn't the worst thing. If I said, Brett, you're probably an idiot, so you should listen, that would be a lot harder to get your head wrapped around that. But the idea that, well, maybe there's something I'm missing. So before I jump right into judgment, I'm going to give them a chance to tell me what that is. And it surprises me how often, there's still sometimes that when they tell me what I'm missing, it's like, all right, I wasn't missing any of that. I think you're an idiot. but probably 80% of the time, it's like, oh, you know what? I hadn't really thought about that. That's an interesting angle. And often what's funny is I don't land where they're at, but I move off of where I'm at, and I'm in this little room and I think I see everything, and all they do is they show me this door, and all of a sudden I'm standing in this big arena and it's like, oh my gosh, I was totally missing thing. And it wasn't even what they were talking about, but it's those brief moments of being completely open
Yeah.
that allow us to take these massive leaps into something, and the conversation might not be where it's like, I totally agree with you now, but we'll have this back and forth where both of us just explode we just, both people in the conversation now are in this whole new playing area that,
Yeah.
anyway,
I,
that's the miracle part.
and it's amazing. I mean, in the times that I've done that, Carrie has taught me something similar. And I think you and I had a conversation about those questions before, because this last political season, uh, was challenging for me.
Yeah.
And I really tried to, and I think I was successful in a lot of ways, but I really tried to look at it through the lens of, I just don't understand, right? And so if I could come at it from a place of trying to seek understanding, and I had a very similar conversation with my daughter about tolerance and acceptance, because I was like, to tolerate someone means you're just putting up with them, and that doesn't feel good to me. Like, I don't want to tolerate a family member or a friend or a whole section of the culture. I don't want to just tolerate them. And I had sort of landed on acceptance, but you said something that was really, really interesting, that accepting someone means that there was something unacceptable. And I hadn't thought about that. Like, I hadn't really drilled down deep enough on that word. And I'm a big fan of, like, words have meaning. And so thinking through, what does that really mean? So I love the idea of embracing, because that for me takes it back to, what does love require of me? Which is, sort of, it kind of gets into religion or church, but like Jesus said, love people the way that I loved you. And so we often operate from that place of, like, what does love require of me? And the embracing piece, like, you kind of hit on that. Like, I need to embrace you, and there's nothing that I want to change about you.
Well,
And
and it's that is the Jesus thing, is because that's the whole power of Jesus, is that the way he loves us unconditionally. So we can screw stuff up, we can butcher things,
Mhm.
we can do that, and he's like, okay, I'm still there, dude. So whenever you know, I'll always be voting the highest vote. You just have to figure out what you're going to vote, because that's the only voting question here, right? And that's the embracing part, is, there's nothing you can do that's gonna or
yeah,
say that makes it so I can't just love you and think that you're smart. Yeah, anyway, yeah, that's it.
yeah, no, that's really great. I love that. I think it's super helpful. And I think in this time where people are so quick to cancel, where I've sort of landed is that, like, I don't understand. And what that means is that I'm the one that has the problem. I'm the one that needs to do the work, because you may understand perfectly what you're saying. I don't get it. So I need to do the work to try to get closer to understanding. And oftentimes where I land is, I don't know it all. Like, I'm the idiot in the room, right? Like, I don't know everything. There's so much more out there. So it's
Here's the
easier
part.
for me to
Here's the
say,
part to be careful of, though. The part to be careful of with that is that your insights and your views aren't stupid either. So and that's where it's like, um, to be able to say, oh, there's all kinds of material here. So to walk in saying, "Hey, I'm right," is problematic, right?
Mhm.
That's hard. To walk in and say, "I'm wrong," is problematic too, because your insights do matter. To walk in and say, I might be missing some things, so that the way I feel is based on partial
Yeah.
information. If I had, it's what you said about, when in the corporate work that I do, and someone is telling me, oh, this person did this and they said this, almost without a doubt that the story's been bent and formed and shaped, and I'm hearing part of it. And if I buy into the hearing a half of a story and run off and make judgments about what the other person's doing without hearing their, because inevitably, if I go say, okay, well, you know, let let's put a pin in that. I hear your story. I got it. I'm not saying it's true or not true. I want to talk to the other person, though. And I want to talk to this, and I want to facilitate that. And when I can just go in and be open, when I hear the other side of the story, it's like, okay, this is making more sense. And I can see, and almost always it's like, hey, so this person has accountability here, and this other person has accountability here, and it's rarely this person's wrong, this person's right, this person needs to get spanked and punished, and the other person gets to feel vindictive or vindicated. And
Right.
that's just not how it works. That's not life, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so, but when you assume that the other person's smart, so it starts for me with saying, I'm assuming, and it doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't matter whether it's the homeless guy on the street or whatever. I'm assumed that they're smart. There's something about them that's smart, and they've experienced things that I have not experienced.
Mm-hmm.
So they've got some different perspectives, and those perspectives and insights, if I could find a way to add them into my viewpoints, and then I can reshuffle and make a new assessment. And I may stay with exactly where I was at.
Right.
But I also might, and that's okay, because I'm smart too. But usually as I reshuffle their information into my deck, I end up drawing a different hand than what I would draw otherwise. And I start saying, I sat next to someone on a flight about 3 years ago, and I got upgraded to first class, which is always interesting, because it's like, oh, maybe I'm going to meet somebody famous now in first class. And I sat next to an Indian lady, the red dot Indian,
mm-hmm.
from India, and she was in the full garb and had the red dot on her head. And I sat down in my seat, and I hadn't sat there for a minute, and she started the conversation by saying, hey, so do you believe in reincarnation? And I'm like, wow, it's going to be a long flight.
Yeah, that escalated quickly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we haven't even backed out of the gate yet, and we're into reincarnation. And I'm like, you know what? And so I caught myself, because I found some judgments coming up. I was thinking, I really don't want to be talking about reincarnation for this whole flight. And it wasn't anything I'd even thought about. It was just like one of those in my mind at the time. It's one of those wacky, goofy things and so instead what I said is, you know what? I have not thought a lot about reincarnation. It's not even something that, I think I know where I'm at on it, but I don't really understand it. I said, why? You guys believe in reincarnation, right? You look, I think that I know that, but I'm not sure if I know that. But since you asked the question, I'm assuming you believe in that. So tell me, what's the thing that lights you up about that? What am I missing about this whole reincarnation thing? And she talked for about 20 minutes about the beauty of moving through different and experiencing life from lots of different perspectives, and the growth and her version of this eternal kind of progression thing through all these different ways of experiencing life. And we got all done, and she said, so what, does that make sense to you? And I said, you know what? Here's what I believe. And it's shifted talking to you. So I believe in a God that if it would ever serve me in my growth to experience what it felt like to be a dog, that the God I believe in would probably give me that experience. And I don't know if that's required or if that's what happens or not. I'm not there yet, but I believe in a God that gives me all the experiences I need to make me the best I can possibly be. And it sounds like that. And she said, that's it. That's exactly it. And ever since then, I've never had if someone asked me about reincarnation, it's like, I don't know. I do believe this, and it helped redefine it. But I went from, I don't really want, this is goofy, and I don't want to tell someone that I think it's totally goofy.
Yeah.
And I went to thinking, that's a really powerful life perspective, and I have complete respect, and I totally get why someone could go hook, line, and sinker in on that. I totally get it. That makes sense to me. And then I was good, and she was good, but it took that moment of like really wanting to know why are you so passionate about this, such that somebody would sit down on the seat next to you on an airplane and the first question out of your
Start with that.
mouth?
Why?
I mean, I am just curious, because I wouldn't start off with my stuff about, I wouldn't sit down with someone and say, hey, so do you believe in Jesus?
Yeah.
I just wouldn't start a conversation with that. And it's like, and you got to respect the passion, right?
Yeah.
You, you got to, if I ever had a chance to talk to a terrorist, I wouldn't talk about how bad it is or whatever. I'd be like, I'm so curious about what are you so passionate about, such that you'd strap a bomb on your chest and that you'd like give your entire life to the cause. I am missing something.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
it sounds crazy to me, and but I'd love to hear your side of it. I mean, that's what I would want to know. And if I knew that, we could probably figure out the whole terrorism thing if we ask those kind of questions instead of the,
Yeah, you're right, I'm wrong.
yeah, and we should kill you before you kill us.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah, it's a tricky situation, all of that. And I think one of the reasons why I love you so much and I love talking to you is you have like the most genuine curiosity and this really great ability. And I'm sure that it's something you've developed to be able to take that short breath and go, hey, all the things in my head are telling me that you're crazy and I don't want to talk about this. But what actually comes out of your mouth is, tell me more. Help me understand why that's how you started the conversation. Because that's a gift.
It's a trained thing. It is a completely trained, because I struggle with the conversation all the time. And there's times that there's times when my wife will want to talk to me about something, and it's like, I already know where you're at on this issue. I don't want to talk about it. And I just shut it down, so I'm not by any stretch perfect at this.
For sure. I get that.
I catch it a lot. And I do find myself, and I find that I'm both judgmental and self-righteous and curious all at the same time. I'm all of those things. And I have to pick the curious one. I like have to sort through my different personalities.
So it's a choice.
It is a choice. It is a choice. And it's funny because as soon as I ask the question, so the question for me forces me into the curiosity thing. And so the way I word the question is super important, because I could ask it in a way that's kind of condescending and passive aggressive.
Sure.
And it actually gets you, because that I'm super blunt, right? You
Mm-hmm.
From our experience, so like way more direct and blunt than most people. And
correct.
I say lots of hard things to people, but there's hard things that are mostly true.
Yeah.
And so, I have the ability, if I wanted to, just to be passive aggressive and say that. And I have this need to be honest with people. That's a core part of who I am. So the way I ask the question actually gives me this ability to satisfy my need, to tell them how stupid they are, and to be open at the same time, which is a really unique. I walk a really fine line. So when I feel good being able to say, you know what, that's like the stupidest thing I've ever heard. That makes me feel good, because that's what I'm thinking. And then I say, tell me what I'm missing.
So you get to be honest.
That opens this door. Yeah. And it opens this door, and then I can just listen. I'm not placating them, and I'm told them I think it's stupid. And I open the door, though, to say, give me some more information that I'm missing. And when I do that, most of the time I get more information. And then all of a sudden, then it's not work after that. Then it's like, wait a second. So what are you saying? And now I'm off and running in this whole new world, that just because their information is unlocking some stuff for me. And then it doesn't take any work at all to sustain the conversation. It only took work for that. The 5 seconds I spent asking the question.
There's something really powerful in that, though, in that you get to be totally authentic and genuine in saying, I think that's the stupidest thing ever.
Right.
And you get to honor them by saying and exercising like the vulnerability and the humility and going, tell me what I'm missing. Right. And it reminds me of Brene Brown's clear as kind, unclear as because you're clear. You're telling them, I think this is dumb.
Yeah. Right.
And I think you're right, there is a fine line, because as I'm thinking, I just picture people out there going, oh, well, Brett said we could just tell people they're stupid, and just sharing what they feel and missing the nuance of, like, because you're also, you're a really charming guy. I mean, you're direct. I mean, you've said some things to me, in conversation, I've been like, oh, okay. And but you're a charming guy, and you have an ability to build trust with people really quickly, I think. So when you do say something direct, um, it's often correct. And so they're like, how did he know that that was like the thing, right? So there is some balance there. So I don't want anyone out there just running around telling people they're stupid. You know,
Right.
practice it,
Just
build the skills.
follow it up with. So what? Tell me what I'm missing, because maybe
Yeah,
I'm stupid, and
yeah,
maybe we're both stupid, or maybe we're both brilliant. But
yeah,
it, where I'm sitting right now, I'm only seeing half of it.
yeah,
I'm seeing my side of the story, and that's it. I want to hear your side of the story before I.
yeah. That's amazing. I have two more things that I really want to touch on if you
Okay,
have time.
I do.
Um, One of them is, you shared with me that you keep an extra seat open in your vehicle.
I I do. It's more than vehicle. So I have a kind of a life philosophy. So this is one of my transitions in being an old guy. Is I spent a lot of my younger life. My younger life, I probably spent a ton of time chasing things that were important to me, without a lot of regard for anybody else. And as I moved into as I transitioned into making a difference with other people, I went into this frantic place of constantly trying to figure out, where am I supposed to be? What am I supposed to be doing? How? And it was the modern day version of, or the old day version of the modern day version of FOMO.
Yeah.
I was
Okay.
always worried about not being in the right place at the right time, or saying the right
Yeah.
thing, and I put tons of pressure on myself of, am I supposed to do this? Am I supposed to? They invited me to speak at this conference. I really don't want to go, but maybe that's what I'm supposed to be doing. And and I about killed myself trying to be everywhere and do everything, and it was really hard work.
Yeah.
And
I think
and
a
I
lot of people experience that. I know I've had seasons of not
and
saying
and
no enough.
I've moved into a place in life where I first pick the things that I want to do, and then in the things that I'm doing, I always just leave an empty seat. And so I live in Jackson Hole, and I love spending time in the outdoors and going horseback riding and fishing, and I'm careful. I've got a drift boat with 3 seats. I always, if I'm going to invite someone, I only invite one person. So if someone pops up in the last minute and says, "Hey, I really want to spend some time with you. I want to talk to you," it's like, I don't have time to sit down and talk, but if you want to go fishing with me, you're welcome to sit in my drift boat. Or, we have a guest house and an apartment here that we Airbnb, and that's an empty seat for us. So I have a deep belief that anybody who shows up here in our Airbnb, that there's a purpose, why they're in my life, in my space right now. And I don't have to go chase them. They'll just come to me. I just need to make sure I've got an empty seat for them. And in my car, yeah, my passenger seat's always cleaned off. And when I drive places, if I see a hitchhiker, it's like, oh, that's a person for my empty seat. And I will pick up just about every hitchhiker I ever see. And I tell them, when they get in my car, I say, all right, so you're sitting in my empty seat right now. And where are you going? Where are you headed to? And they'll tell me, and I'll say, okay, well, that's 35 minutes away. So we've got 35 minutes to figure out why you're sitting in my car with me. And usually about 3 minutes in, they're doubled over, bawling their eyes out, talking about something deep and
You have that
when I
effect
drop
on
them off,
people.
huh?
So you have that effect on people, don't you?
I do have that effect on people, but I see life as coming. If I'm out there and doing my thing, the people that I can need to influence, and there's things I need to do, they'll come to me. They'll meet me instead of me have to go to them constantly. And the going to them part, in retrospect, was a lot more judgmental, because I was going places to fix people and do things, and I was just constantly trying to force it. And now it's like just a puzzle. I
Yeah.
wonder why you're here. and you're here for a week. So by the end of this week, I'll tell a guest in our Airbnb at the end of this week, then we'll know why you came here and why you're staying here with us this week, because there's something that you have to teach me, or something that I can teach you, but there's a
Yeah.
purpose in you being here. I believe that. And when they leave, then one or both of us is always saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that we had this time together." Because and you can play in those major. You kind of talked about that at the beginning. I don't tend to play lightly in people's lives. I'm usually there's probably thousands of people that if they said, "Hey, give me the top 5 people where your interaction with them has made your life pivot." I'll be on lots of those lists because those are the places where I love playing, not the, hey, we're
Yeah.
really good friends or whatever. It's I anyway.
Yeah.
You know that. So
No, I love it. And when I first heard that story, I was just like, that is the coolest thing ever. And at the same time, like, I was like, I don't know that I could do that. So, like, I don't necessarily pick up the hitchhikers. It did shift my thought process on, and it's helped me come to a place where, I've always kind of felt like there's no such thing as a coincidence. Like everything's part of a greater plan, and we get to choose if we are open to the lessons or open to, the divine intervention that's laid out for us, and allow life to happen for us. Like there's a reason that somebody reaches out to me or to you or to anyone else, and how we interact with each other, and being open. For a while, I considered it, I sort of referred to it as a culture of yes. Like, if I can get invited somewhere, I want to go, I want to be there, see what collisions happen, see who I meet, see who. I've had to modify that because I got myself into trouble where I was saying yes to everything, and there's just not enough time, and my priorities are my children and my wife, and
and,
so there's a
and
balance there.
and so many of the things in life that are important, you're not asked. A lot of times, the other person doesn't even know. They don't
Yeah.
know that they're there, and so um, a level above that. And I think you have to go through. There has to be a phase of yes. There has to be. It's part of the progress. I went through a long phase of yes, and I've also found that the bulk of what I do, people didn't come in asking for what I do. They were in my proximity. That was one of your words. They moved into my orbit. And instead, when I started seeing that people that they moved into my orbit intentionally or unintentionally, that there's purpose in everything, and that there's a level of divine organization and structure and curriculum, both for me and the people around me. It's not always that my job is to save them, or help them. Often it's they've got some insight or something to share that makes me see things differently, or
Yeah.
changes my trajectory. But when I see that there's always purpose, there's a reason why the person standing in front of you in McDonald's, in line at McDonald's, is standing in front of you. And on the micro level, it gets down to that. If we're willing to trust that,
Yep.
what we'll find is, well, man, that's where all the miracles. That's the miracles. That's the stuff miracles are made out of, right there.
Yeah.
And it's not hey, I got invited to this speaking engagement, and while I was there, one of the people in the audience that came to hear me speak had this transfer. It's like, those kind of happen on their own. It's the unexpected, the stuff that's in our hearts, the stuff we're praying for that we don't even talk about. The ways that gets answered is by trusting that things are in perfect order, exactly where we're at. And
Yeah.
I can actually go fishing. That was my big epiphany. Was I love to fish, and I can go fishing and completely be my purpose and fish all at the same time. And I don't have to chase it. If someone's supposed to be with me, God will put them right in my fishing boat with me.
Yeah.
They just will. That's what'll happen. And they won't know why they're there. And I won't know why they're there. And they didn't come to, and, you know, and the
Yeah.
miracles happen.
So good. It's so good because it also flips it to, if they're not there or if they're not showing up, it's because they're not supposed to be,
Right.
So both sides of that coin are totally accurate, which is a great segue into the last thing that I wanted. I mean, not necessarily the last, but on my list of things that I had to talk to you about was Charles McAllister. This story is amazing, and it is filled with tiny miracles and quite frankly, huge ones, like things that are just seemingly unbelievable, um, depending on where your filter is, right? Where your worldview lands. But I would love to share that story because I think it is an amazing story of trusting and listening and all of it.
Yeah, it was a crazy. So I'll tell you the story, at least from my, what's really funny is that in this story there's about 10 stories, and depending on whose perspective you're listening to, we spent the weekend with, let me tell the story first, and then we'll,
Yeah.
so it's been interesting because everybody has their own miracle in the story. But about 10 years ago, I was speaking at a big conference in Las Vegas, in your hometown.
Yep.
And I was speaking at the International Builders Conference at the convention center there. And I was also coaching a group of people for a company that is in Dallas. And on Monday of that week, I was going to give them an assignment to go out and connect with the stranger and find 20 things they had in common with the stranger. And they had to be 20 things that most people would not have in common. So they had to be 20 things that weren't super common with people.
Yeah.
So you couldn't say things like, we both like food. And
right. We both have shoes on.
We both have shoes on, right? And so it was a Saturday night. I'd spoken that afternoon, and I'm on the Strip, and I'm thinking about this stretch I'm going to give to this group, these 50 people I'm coaching, and one of my traits that is sometimes good and sometimes not is I don't like to. I believe in eating my own dog food. So before I gave it to them, I said, I'm going to go out and I want to do this. I want to experience it, and I want to make sure it works the way I think it will. The way it works on paper. And so I just went out, and I'm walking down along the Strip by the MGM, and I see a guy that's an artist on the sidewalk, and he's drawing pictures for people for $20 or something. And you could tell he's kind of homeless. I mean, the way he's dressed and stuff. And I stopped and talked to him for a little bit. And I said, I'm doing this project, and I'm going to coach a bunch of people. Can I buy you dinner, and can we sit down, and will you do a project with me? And so we went into this Fat Burger, and I bought dinner, and we started asking questions, and it started picking up steam. And he went from kind of being somewhat reserved to, by the time we're done, it's just rapid fire, back and forth. Have you ever done this? What about this? What's your favorite here? How have you done? And he's asking me as many questions and I am thinking, oh my gosh, this is incredible. This is way better than I imagined it would be. And I'm just going back and forth, and we are laughing and belly laughing. I mean, it was, and at the end of it, I'm like, okay, I got to film this. I was going to just tell him about it, but I'm like, I got to film this. So I took out my phone, and I said, and I started the video, and I said, hey, this is Brett Harward. I'm on the Strip in Las Vegas, Nevada. And this is my new friend, Charles McAllister. And that was the guy's name. And then I kind of interviewed him, and we talked about what we had in common and what we had learned about each other and what a good experience we'd had. And I posted it, and like I asked him a whole bunch of questions. We didn't film it like the interaction, we just filmed it at the end. Yeah. One of the questions I had asked him at the time that kind of, I had a ping when he said it, but I didn't like know what to do, is I asked him about his biggest regret in life. He said, I have a child I don't know. I don't even know. And I'm thinking, how you can't find someone that you don't even know whether it's a boy or girl or what their name is or where they're at or if they're even alive. Yeah, I mean, that you have to have one of those pieces of information to even start searching. It's like there's not even the ability to search for this child because you don't know anything about it. And so I kind of sidestepped it and told him, hey, said at some point I'd like to help you with your art career. we talked a little bit about that, and we left, and we got each other's phone numbers actually, and then I lost his phone number. So, and I did call him once at one point about a month later and just check in and say hi to him, and I left. So 10 years passed, and I've thought about Charles a lot. I've watched the video I made with him probably 20 times, just and on January 16th this year, I got a message on LinkedIn that kind of shocked me, and it said, "Hey, my name is Peter McAllister, and you interviewed my dad 10 years ago, and I'm 42 years old. I've never met my dad, and I've searched for him for my entire life, and I only found a picture of him yesterday." He said, I later found out he had probably sent 200 or 300 pictures to his mom. He'd get online and look for Black Peter McAllisters or Black Charles McAllisters, and he would send a picture that were about the age of his dad would be, and he'd send pictures to his mom saying, "Is this him? Is this him? Is this?" Because she didn't have any pictures of him. Wow. And it's like, no, that's not him. That's not him. There's a whole bunch of kind of looks like him a little bit, but not totally. And so he's thinking, she's not even gonna be able to help me because she don't even remember what he looks like.
40 years, well, like I don't look like I looked.
Right. And so he said he said it. He found a picture from a college yearbook for Pitt Technology School or Pitt Tech, and he sent it to his mom. He found it on Ancestry.com. Said, "Is this my dad?" And she said, "That's him." And so he saw the first picture ever of his whole life of his dad. He had never even talked to anybody who had talked to his dad except for his mom. And he spent all day long on Facebook on Friday, and on Saturday morning he finds he's going through and he's like 10 links in, and the last video is a video that shows the thumbnail had a black guy, and it said interview with Charles McAllister or something. It was what the text said, and I don't know who made the notes or whatever, because I say the word Charles McAllister on the video, but it didn't say it anywhere. And he said, I turned on the video, and he said, some white guy starts off talking. He's like, he's getting ready to turn it off because it wasn't what he thought. And then he said, I turned the camera, and he said, all of a sudden I'm looking at my dad, and I recognized him because I had seen his picture, and I recognized that's my dad. And not only was it my dad, but we're talking about my dad in the interviews. Yeah. He's not just like a person on the film. It's about him.
He hears his voice, he sees him, he's learning about,
he's laughing, and he's talking about all the stuff that we're talking about, all the things that Charles and I have in common, and running track in high school and doing so he's not only talking, but he's learning all these details about his dad's life, and he's watching it saying, oh my gosh, I ran track. I ran the 440 in track, and my sons both run the 440, and we didn't know anything about that. And as I'm going through my 20 things I have in common, his son is saying, I do the same thing. I feel the same way. I've got that in common with him too. And so I get this LinkedIn message saying, hey, I want to talk to you if you would call me. So we set up a call for Sunday morning, and I called him, and as we were talking, I was really moved, and I was thinking, this is so weird that 10 years ago this video would come back like this, and it's so weird that 10 years ago I had the thought, we can't possibly find your child. We didn't know whether it was a son or daughter even.
Yeah,
we couldn't possibly find them because we don't have any information at all. So the fact that somehow from the video they found me, I'm thinking that's a miracle. This is a miracle, and there's a God thing in this that is really, profound. And so as we're talking, he said, do you know anything about my dad? Have you talked to him? And I am just kicking myself thinking, dude, I had his phone number, and I don't have, well, come to find out, he's probably had 8 phones since then that are different phone numbers. So it wouldn't have mattered. But at the time I was like, I screwed this up. This would have been perfect. That was my first thought. This would have been perfect if I would have had his phone number.
Nobody is ever throwing phone numbers away after they hear this story.
That's right. And so I posted on Facebook to my friends in Las Vegas and said, hey, here's a picture of this guy. Will you guys go out and look around, see if you can find him? And I mean, we don't know whether he's still alive. We don't know if he's moved. We have no idea. It's been 10 years is a long time. And, we had some people that said, I think I've seen him in the art district. But they were not very sure. And so
Sure.
after a week of that, then I said, all right. And this is where the kind of the faith thing really came into play. Up to this point, it's a lot of words and not a lot of extra effort. But after 2 weeks, then I said, okay, I called Peter and I said, I'm going to find your dad. So I will go find him. And there's part of me that knew that I could find Peter and I thought that I kind of knew an area because I knew he was an artist and I knew they had an art district down there in Old Town. And so my wife and I hopped on a plane and flew to Vegas, and we dropped into Vegas and we live in Jackson Hole. So the mask thing, I mean, we wear masks in grocery store stuff, but if you're outside, you don't wear a mask here at all.
Yeah.
And the first thing I was shocked about is everybody has masks on everywhere there.
All the time.
The whole time. If they're walking down the strip, if they're out, so everybody has a mask. And a lot of places it's mandated that even outside you have a mask.
Yeah. So you're trying to find a guy that you met 10 years ago
by his eyes.
Las Vegas, hoping he doesn't have a mask on, or you got to remember what he looks like by his eyes.
Well, yeah, I've got to remember what he looks like by his eyes because I'm assuming he's got a mask on because everybody has a mask on.
Yeah.
And so we stayed downtown because that's where I thought that, my best logic was. And so I started off, with this logical, let's calculate it out and figure it out. That's kind of what I have a tendency to do. And I walked around and I had a picture of him on my phone, and I probably asked 50 people the first night. We probably walked 4 or 5 miles first night, back and forth in the art district. And I asked policemen and artists and homeless people, anybody I could find that would be around there a lot. Have you seen this guy? Do you know who this guy is? And I got 100%. I didn't even get anybody that said, yeah, he kind of looks familiar. It was, no, I have no idea. I've never seen him before. I have no idea. And we realized, and we went to bed that night and I thought, okay, this is impossible because it would be hard to find him in the one little place we thought he might be. But now we're left to, we don't even know if he's here. We don't know if all these nagging questions. So the next day we went to where there was more people and we went out to the strip and did the same thing. And we walked 18 miles and I'm sure that we made a lot of people uncomfortable because everybody walked by. I'm looking at him, trying to see their eyes and see if it's because they all had masks on and my wife is walking behind people. It's like, that guy's, I mean, we're down to trying to just, if they were black, they kind of qualified because I couldn't remember, that was the one distinguishing characteristic. And my wife would walk by people and say, Charles McCallum, to see if someone responded or turned around. And
she's great.
There's no, I mean, nothing. And we, this was one of our pivots. So this is one of the things that is after walking for 10 miles, then I said, we had and the way that all the synchronicity, the kind of the flow of how things happen. So my wife, we had somebody that came up to us and wanted to talk to it. You have all these people on the street down there. They're trying to sell you timeshares and stuff. And somebody came up and said, hey, can I talk to you guys for a second? And my wife turned around and just chewed their head off. We're urgently, we're trying to cover as much ground as we can. And she's like, we don't have time right now. Quit it, and then I turned around like I sometimes will do and bit her head off for biting that person's head off and said, okay, be nice to people, be nice to them. You never know. And I said something trying to be snotty to my wife that and I said, you never know, they may know him or, and all of a sudden I had this epiphany. It's like, okay, I'm making this too hard. It's that I teach this empty chair thing, right? And yeah. I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm trying to force it. I am desperately trying to go out and chase Charles down. And so I turned to her and I said, we are making this too hard. In fact, let's start with this. Let's assume the next person that wants to talk to us, the reason they want to talk to us is because they they have information about Charles. And wasn't 2 minutes later, some guy calls us, he's waving at us, hey, can I ask you guys a question? And so it turns out he wanted to sell us some drugs. And my wife just she wanted to just keep on walking. I said, stop, hold on a second. I said, you can ask some, I have some questions for you too. So do you want to go first or do you want me to go first? And he said, okay, why don't you go first? He was surprised. And I pulled up the phone, I showed him a picture of Charles. I said, do you know this guy? Have you ever seen this guy? And he says, yeah, I know that guy. I said, you do? Have you seen him? He said, yeah, I've seen him on the streets all the time. And he said, he's not here. You're not even close to where he's at. He's in a different part of town. And I said, can you show us where he's at? I said, tell me what you wanted to ask me. And he said, I'm not going to even say because I'm embarrassed now. And so he said, okay, I can show you. And so he walked 2.5 miles with us.
Wow.
He walked 2.5 miles, and we talked about him and what he had going on. And we hit a part where he's like, okay, so usually between right here and right here. And it was, like a half-mile section of the strip. He said, I've seen him here before. And, he's over here. He could be over on the other side. But this is where I've seen him. And so we walked the whole area with him, and we didn't see Charles. And he's like, yeah, I don't know where he's at. I haven't seen him but I've seen him in the last couple of weeks. So we knew that he was around someplace.
He was around there, yeah.
And he said, he said, really quiet guy, just stays to himself, doesn't say anything, he has a little pad, and he's drawn stuff for people. I'm like, that's the guy. So without me telling him he was an artist, he told me. That's how I knew he had the right guy.
You knew he was legit, yeah.
Yeah, and I said, okay, well, and so we left, and his name was Derek, and so we my wife and I kind of walked that loop for another couple of hours till it got dark, and then we said, all right, we're still not there, and so we went back to the hotel, and we had to fly out the next morning, and so we're driving to the airport at 10 o'clock in the morning, and I said, and I'm like, this isn't right. We're supposed to find Charles, and so I said, let's get off. And so we have this, on this trip, this is one of those things, a lot of stuff lined up. We end up with a really nice suite for a really cheap price because they're out of the rooms that we've got. So we got to upgrade the suite. We got a rental car for $12 a day, and they're out of rental cars. And so we had this Mustang convertible and we're driving down the strip in our Mustang convertible or we're driving down the freeway. And I said, let's make one last pass on the strip. So we're driving down the strip. We don't have time to walk. We're driving down the strip, going 40 miles an hour on a Sunday morning. And
because the strip is empty right now. Like, you usually can't drive 40 miles an hour.
Right. The strip, there's not hardly any people. There's still hundreds of people outside. There's people everywhere still. It's not as packed as what it's not thousands like there would have been a year. And we're driving down the strip. We're driving past Bellagio, and I'm driving even, and I'm looking out of the sides, and you can't see anybody in their face. Everybody has masks on, and there was a single guy that was standing looking out over the lakes at the Bellagio, and I couldn't see his face. We couldn't see anything. I couldn't tell if he was black or white. I mean, there was nothing remarkable about him. And there's still hundreds of other people that are walking past, and as we drove by it, I just had that thing, and I just knew, and I said, that's him right there. And my wife's like, who? Which one? There's 100 people there. It's like, the guy that's looking out, that's him. And I pulled off into the driveway at Bellagio and jumped out and told my wife, go park the car, figure out how to park the car. And inside I had two conversations going. One conversation was, that's him. I know that's him. And the other conversation is, this is stupid. You're an idiot. You can't know that's him. That makes no sense at all. Right. And I walked, and so I ran down in front of Bellagio. I ran all the way down the sidewalk, and this guy was still standing there. And I said, and I walked up behind him. I still hadn't seen him yet. And I walked up behind him and I said, Charles McAllister? And he turned around, this guy turned around and he said, that would be me. And I was like, The part of me, again, the two sides conversation. One of them was, of course it is. And the other side was, holy crap, you got to be kidding me. I can't believe it. There's no way this could just happen. The mathematics on it are impossible, right?
It's a miracle. I mean, there's no other way to explain it. It's
insane. You know, so I didn't tell him about his son. I told him, I said, I came back to find you. I said, do you remember me? And when we had talked before, I told him I had written a book, and he said, what kind of book? And I was trying to tell him about personal development, and he said, like Chicken Soup for the Soul. And I said, yeah,
sure,
that's close enough. Let's
go with that.
Yeah. So when I said, do you remember me? And he said, yeah, you're Chicken Soup. And I said, that's me. I'm Chicken Soup. That is who I am. He said, yeah, I've thought about you a lot over the years. And he said, we made that video. He said, am I famous yet? That's what he asked me. And I said, you're about to be. And
that's so good. So good.
And so I told him, I've got some friends that really want to support you and be on your team. And so I said, can we meet again next week? I got to fly back right now, but I'll fly back down here. I want to make some introductions for you. And so I called his son, and he said, yeah, I'm in. And so we decided to meet right there in front of the Bellagio where we were standing a week later. And I called his son and said, Peter, you got to get your family and get down to Vegas next weekend. So you're going to meet your dad. And anyway, so the next weekend we flew down again, and it was such a miracle to watch. And Charles was there waiting for us, and this time I got his phone number and put it in every device I had, so I couldn't possibly lose it. And I started off seeing how he's doing, and I'd send him some new clothes and stuff. I said, I want you to look sharp when you meet these people. And his son and his family were there like 50 yards up the walkway there. And so I got him kind of prepared. And then I said, and I waved Peter over. And so Peter came down first, and I said, this is Peter, and he wants to be on your team. And Charles said, good to meet you, Pete. He said, I'm gonna call you Pistol Pete, and I said, well, so here's something you need to know about Peter. His last name is McAllister. And Charles just starts laughing. He says, McAllister? He said, how do you spell it? How do you spell your name? And I said, okay, hold on a second, Charles. He spells it the same as you, because this is your son. And he's like, 2 C's? You spell it with 2 C's? And I said, no, Charles, this is your son. And he said, wait, it's my son? He ain't my son. And I said, no, this is your son. You and I talked about this 10 years ago. This is your son. And he says, wait, where were you born? What was the deal? How old are you? What's the, and then did all the grilling, like, what is the game here? What's the scam?
Yeah.
And then it's funny because his grandson, Roman, looks exactly like Charles. I mean, just the spitting image of Charles. And he says, and so Peter introduces himself, and then he says, let me introduce you to some other people on your team. And he says, this is my son, Peter. This is my son, Roman. And Charles looks at Roman, and Charles says, he turns to me and he's like, he looked just like me. He says, I know you ain't lying now. I said, yeah, you have a son. And it was awesome. And all the God stuff. And then the part of it, the big takeaway, here's what's interesting is I have a lot of those stories because I believe in that. I live life like everything is on purpose. And I dive into a lot of things that if I didn't believe in a God, I would never engage in, because it's way over my head and it's way beyond. The math on it it's impossible. It's impossible math. And so I dive into stuff regularly that is it's in really deep water, that's over my head, and I trust that I'll, as long as I go as far as I'm capable of going, and I show up where I'm supposed to, that then God bridges the insufficiencies for me. That's my version of God. Is this thing that when I've done everything I can do, he doesn't do stuff for me, and he doesn't make things easy.
Yeah.
Um,
It's funny to me because I hear this story as like this once in a lifetime sort of miracle, finding this needle in a haystack. And I know you well enough to know that you have a dozen of these stories
well,
because
I've got
this is who
probably
you
hundreds.
are. It's amazing to me, and this is why I wanted to talk to you, why I wanted you to have this on the show, because people need to recognize. I want people to know that, like, when you live in purpose the way you do, and when you put your beliefs on trial the way you do, like, okay, God, you got me. I'm going in. I'm going all in. Like, there's a leap of faith there that most people don't have.
Right, I'm buying plane tickets, so you better have my biggest.
You gotta, and I'm curious, like, and I know Catherine a little bit, but like, does your wife ever look at you across the dinner table and go, "Really, again? We're doing this again?" Or, I mean, I don't think she'd be your wife if she wasn't on board, but like, is
My wife is super interesting because she doesn't initiate stuff like I do. So I'm usually the one that jumps, and 100% of the time when I say no, it's the God thing. This is what we're supposed to do. My wife has zero pushback ever. She's like, I'm in. So I'm in. What do you want from me? I'll be right with you.
such a
Uh,
great partner.
and yeah, and she is. So I definitely dive into things that are where any reasonable person would say, okay, this is stupid. And I don't know that I have. It's why I drive into the airport. I, I was completely like, this isn't right. This isn't right. Even though I'm thinking it's not. Oh, this was really unlikely. This was a 1 in a million thing anyway. And so I'm not surprised we didn't find him. And maybe something else. Trying to make it okay. I
Yeah.
wasn't there. I'm like, okay, what are we doing? This doesn't work like this. It's 100% that we're going to find him. How can something's wrong? It
Yeah.
literally was that kind of a like I was shocked that we hadn't found him. And
Where most people would have been like, "Yeah, I figured that was, it was a good time. We had fun." But I mean, it's funny because I'm thinking, like, there's so many layers, like you said, there's so many stories within this story. Like, most people wouldn't walk 15 miles in a day to try to find a person that you couldn't recognize. Like, there's so many things in this for me, I lost my mom when I was 3. So it's extremely moving to me to hear Peter's story of getting just to see a video of his dad and hear his voice and get to know things about him on a personal level. Like, I would love to have that opportunity.
that we could have stopped the story right
Just
then.
stop there.
It would have been just an amazing miracle, right?
Wow. I mean, that if I had that from my own personal experience, that would be just more than I could ever ask for.
Mhm.
Right. And so, listening to this as I watch this, and it's funny, you don't post on Facebook a lot, or I don't see your Facebook posts a lot.
I don't post much.
And so, the way the algorithm works, if you don't post a lot, a lot of people don't see it. And so it was really interesting to me also that I saw your post within like a couple of hours of you posting the original, "Hey, there's this crazy thing going on. If you happen to know anybody in Vegas." So we shared it and we tagged a bunch of people we knew. And I don't know if any of them were of any help,
You
but
did.
watching the story unfold from beginning to end
And
was so empowering.
it's the difference to some degree. It's the difference between goofing around on the basketball court and just goofing around and throwing the ball up from 3/4 of the court and having it swish and be like, holy crap, that's amazing. It's the difference between that and standing at the 3/4 court mark and say, everybody watch, because I'm about to swish this. And I'm posting on Facebook saying I'm going down. I didn't report it afterwards. I'm saying Catherine and I are going down to find Charles.
You did.
So we're going to go find him. And like, I'm calling the 1 in a million shot on the front end because I
You are.
trust it. I
Yeah.
trust it that much.
Babe Ruth, you're pointing at the
That's right. I am. I'm pointing to
you're
I'm
pointing.
pointing to the fence.
I told my wife after I saw that post, before you found him, I said, if I ever need to find a needle in a haystack, I'm calling Brett Harward because I know that he can get it done. And it wasn't, I don't know, a couple weeks later, you were sharing, we found him. And I was just in tears because I was like, this guy just all in all the time. And I love it. And I think it's a really great place to sort of wrap it up. And
Super.
Just such good stuff. If you want to follow the Charles McAllister story, just Google it. There's already news articles written about it. There's videos all over. I mean, it's amazing. And Charles will be famous for sure. And you guys are doing some stuff to get his artwork out, and I think his son's building him a website, and
Yep.
like
Yep.
just and the forgiveness. I mean, there's a whole other conversation.
That was
story
huge.
upon story.
Watching the forgiveness and did you see the whole video with the reunion and everything? Have you watched that video?
I've not seen the whole video yet.
Oh, okay. You go look on my Facebook page and look at the whole video that I made after the reunion.
Okay.
And if you want to learn about forgiveness, if you want a powerful experience of forgiveness, so Peter, he like what prompted me to actually say I'm going to go find him is because I watched Peter post did a post on YouTube, and he's kind of a minister and does some stuff like that. And he told the story of Jacob and Joseph and Joseph getting sold into slavery by his brothers, and how he had every right to just hate them and to despise them. And when he heard his dad was still alive, and he's like, send the chariots, send the best of the best, and he welcomed his father and gave him jewelry and just and kneeled in front of his father, and even though all these horrible things had happened to him, and Peter taught a lesson on that, and I listened to his version of the story, and I was just so moved, and I'm like, gosh, I've got to do this. And if you watch the video, I mean, when he finally connects up with his dad, and he brings a prayer shawl and he puts it over his dad's neck, and his dad's kind of looking at this, and then he starts, and then it's something that's kind of an African American thing that it would never even occur to me, but he takes and he's taking his dad's hands, and we're videoing this entire thing, and he's touching his dad's hands, and they're looking at each other's hands, and he says, Dad, do you ever wear rings? And he says, I can't. His dad says, I can't. Charles says, I can't afford rings. And he says, I want you to have this one. And he takes a ring off, and he puts it on, and he puts bracelets on him, and he puts some gold around his neck, and he all this stuff is like, I want you to feel. No, it wasn't just, I'm not going to hold it against you. It's like, I'm going to honor you, and I'm going to love on you, and I'm going to and it was, just sitting there watching it. The people that were walking by on the strip, I mean, they're saying, what is happening here? And we're kind of telling the story, and we got perfect strangers that are like bawling their eyes out and sobbing, and because this whole, it's like, we're missing that in our society. We're so easily offended, and it's like, oh, it is about that. And
yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing. It is. When you talk about thinking about your legacy, brother, you're crushing it at the legacy game. I mean, I'm having a hard enough time holding it together so we can keep talking. It's so good. And I think that's a really, really good place to just honor you and honor, the things that you're doing to change this world, to bring accountability and vulnerability to people, and to live it out. I mean, like, if anybody's living it out, because some of the stuff you get into is just crazy, and it works because you trust in it. And I'm so grateful that I get to be a part of that, and that you've helped me realize that. And so thank you.
Well, I love you, brother. So
Same.